While the entire world had its eyes locked on Tapalpa on Sunday, February 22nd, 2026, while every news channel on the planet was looping the name El Mencho, while 9 states across Mexico erupted in simultaneous blockades, while highways burned and airports shut down, something else was unfolding, something that almost no one caught. 100 kilometers away, in a small municipality called El Grulo, Jalisco, another man was in the middle of his own operation. He was not hiding. He was not running. He was giving orders, paying bounties, coordinating chaos in real time across an entire country. That man was Hugo César Macías Ureña, known in cartel circles as El Tuli. And that same Sunday, he also fell. The Mexican army did not just kill El Mencho that weekend, running in parallel. In a separate location, they eliminated the brain behind the money, the logistics, and the hired killers of the CJNG. The man without whom the cartel could not function for a single day. And what nobody is explaining properly is what that actually means for what comes next. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly who El Tuli was inside the CJNG structure, why his death may ultimately prove more destabilizing than El Mencho's, and who is already moving to fill that void. Hunter, to grasp the full weight of what happened, you first have to understand who this man actually was, because most coverage has either ignored him entirely or reduced him to a footnote beneath El Mencho's headline. He was not a hitman. He was not a regional plaza boss controlling one corner of one city. He was something far more consequential than either of those things. Hugo César Macías Ureña El Tuli, also known as El Tulipan, El Sino, and Julio, was the logistical and financial engine of the Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación. He was, in practical terms, the functional number 2 of the entire organization, the man who kept the machine running while El Mencho lived as a ghost. His name was already well known to Mexican military intelligence long before this weekend. The 2022 Guacamaya leaks, the massive hack of the Secretariat of National Defense, placed him explicitly in documents as one of the closest operational commanders to El Mencho's inner circle. He appeared under 4 different aliases across those files. Multiple identities, because in this world, a single name is a liability. He understood that. He had been operating under that principle for years. While El Mencho rotated between ranches every 72 hours, never speaking on a cell phone, deliberately leaving no digital footprint, it was El Tuli who handled the day-to-day reality of running a multi-billion-dollar criminal empire. He paid the salaries, he moved the money, he coordinated the regional operators scattered across Mexico and beyond. He trained the recruits and made sure orders from the top reached the street intact. Think about what that role actually requires. You are not just managing numbers on a ledger. You are the living connection between the most feared man in Latin America and every single commander, plaza boss, and foot soldier who answers to that man. You are the spine of the organization. El Mencho was the head. El Tuli was the spine. Captured members of the cartel in multiple separate investigations named him as the commander they reported to directly. He was not a name in a file. He was the voice that reached them when El Mencho could not. And here is the detail that matters most. When El Mencho fell in Tapalpa, El Tuli did not grieve. He did not go to ground. He did not disappear. He acted. Think about the situation clearly. The boss has just been killed in a military operation in Tapalpa. Army helicopters are in the air. Special forces are on the ground. The entire world is watching every mountain road in Jalisco. Every rational instinct says go silent, go dark, disappear. El Tuli did the exact opposite. From El Grulo, nearly 100 kilometers from the operation, he immediately began coordinating the cartel's violent response in real time. Roadblocks appeared on highways across multiple states simultaneously. Vehicles were set on fire, direct attacks were launched against military installations, National Guard bases, businesses, and government buildings. And then there is the detail that tells you everything about how this man thought. He placed a bounty of 20,000 pesos on the head of every soldier his men could kill. That number is not chaos. That is a budget line in an operational protocol. 20,000 pesos per military death. He was not panicking. He was not acting out of grief or rage. He had a structure capable of receiving that order and executing it simultaneously across 9 states within hours. Jalisco, Michoacán, Colima, Guanajuato, Nayarit, Zacatecas, Tamaulipas, Aguascalientes, Guerrero, 85 roadblocks across 11 states, 70 people detained across 7 states. 70 people detained across 7 states. The United States Embassy ordered its citizens to shelter in place. Canada followed. Puerto Vallarta was placed under confinement. The Guadalajara airport shut down entirely. Someone activated all of that. Someone had the infrastructure, the personnel, the communications, and the command authority to mobilize an entire country's worth of violence within hours of losing the organization's leader. That someone was Tuli. An emotional reaction does not span 9 states in 4 hours. That requires pre-established protocols, active communications channels, available resources, and a chain of command that does not hesitate. What the world witnessed on the afternoon of February 22nd was not grief. It was Plan B executing with precision. Tuli had rehearsed that moment. Now comes the question that reframes everything. If Tuli was that powerful, if he commanded that much infrastructure and that much loyalty, how did they find him? How did the army locate the second most dangerous man in the most powerful cartel in Latin America on the same day they killed the first? The answer requires going back further than this weekend. Because Mencho did not lose his support structure in a single day, he lost it piece by piece over years. And Tuli was simply the last piece standing. Mencho's brother Antonio Oseguera Cervantes was arrested in December 2022. His other brother, Abraham Oseguera Cervantes, was arrested in February 2025. His son, Ruben Oseguera Gonzalez El Menchito, the man who was supposed to be the dynasty's heir, was extradited to the United States and sentenced to life in federal prison. His former wife, Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia, the financial architect of the cartel's money laundering network, was captured and imprisoned, one by one. The entire family architecture that held the CJNG together from the inside was systematically dismantled, and with each arrest, Tuli stepped further into the vacuum. He absorbed more responsibility, more trust, more direct access to Mencho. By the time February 22nd arrived, Tuli was not just a senior commander. He had essentially assumed the roles that Mencho's brothers had occupied before their arrests. He was the last genuine insider, the last person who held both the operational knowledge and the personal trust required to speak for the organization. That is precisely why finding him carried as much strategic weight as finding Mencho. Mexican Central Military Intelligence had been tracking anomalies for weeks before the operation, not in the field, but in the flows. Money movements with repeated patterns, encrypted communications showing unusual activity. And when Mencho fell in Tapalpa, something in that chain slipped, not necessarily through betrayal, sometimes through the simple mathematics of crisis. One extra call made under pressure, one cash transfer too large, executed too fast. They recovered 7.2 million pesos and $965,000 in cash from Tuli's location. You do not move that volume of money without leaving a trace. And when you are simultaneously trying to coordinate a national response across 9 states, you make errors you would never make on a calm Tuesday morning. The army read that trail, and they moved. An airmobile unit of special forces from the Parachute Rifleman Brigade was deployed over El Gruel. No warning reached Tuli in time. When he spotted the military presence, he attempted to flee in a vehicle, firing on soldiers as he went. The military repelled the attack. Tuli died at the scene. One long-barreled weapon, one handgun, ammunition, magazines, the vehicle, and nearly 8 million pesos and dollars that would never reach a single hitman. Everything turned over to the Specialized Organized Crime Unit of the Attorney General's office. Here is what almost nobody is saying correctly today. Mencho's death is the headline. Tuli's death is the structural emergency. In any criminal organization, the leader is the symbol, but the financial operator is the nervous system. Mencho could afford to live in the mountains for months at a time, completely off the grid, precisely because Tuli kept everything functioning in the background. Salaries reached the right hands. Regional operators received their instructions. Route stayed active. The fentanyl kept moving toward Asia, toward Oceania, through Pacific ports. Methamphetamine precursor chemicals kept arriving from China through the port of Manzanillo. Fuel theft networks kept generating hundreds of millions across Michoacán and Veracruz. None of that machinery runs by itself. None of it runs without someone managing both the money and the people simultaneously. Who does that now? The brutal irony here is that the CJNG built its reputation on being precisely the organization that did not have this problem. Unlike the Sinaloa cartel, the CJNG was known for tight vertical structure, clear lines of command, loyalty enforced through lethal consequences for disloyalty. That structure worked because two men held it together. El Mencho providing the fear, Tuli providing the order. Terror at the top, administration in the middle. Both are now gone. The comparison to Sinaloa is not just useful. It is a direct warning. When El Chapo was captured and then imprisoned, his sons, the Trapitos, moved quickly and violently to consolidate control. The transition was brutal and messy, but it happened. There was a bloodline with both the name and the operational capacity to claim the throne. The CJNG does not have that option. El Menchito is serving life in a United States federal prison. The brothers are in maximum security. The financial architect of the family is behind bars. Tuli is dead. In the span of roughly 3 years, this organization lost its public symbol, its operational spine, its only viable succession plan, and its chief financial administrator. There is no comparable precedent in the modern history of Mexican organized crime. What remains is a multi-billion-dollar organization armed to a standard that rivals state militaries, present across more than a dozen countries, run by regional operators who have spent years accumulating their own resources, their own territorial loyalties, and their own ambitions. Men who obeyed not out of ideology or affection, but because they understood with absolute clarity what happened to those who did not obey. The fear of El Mencho was the glue. Tuli was the administrator of that fear. Neither one exists anymore. Security analysts are already naming the candidates, and none of the options come without serious complications. The first name is Juan Carlos Valencia Gonzalez, known as LO3 or El Plumas. He is El Mencho's stepson and by most analytical accounts, the most natural heir to the organization. He controls the Grupo El Attack, the CJNG's most elite tactical unit, responsible for targeted executions and territorial enforcement. The United States government has placed a $5 million bounty on his head. He carries the family bloodline and has demonstrated real operational capacity. But does he carry the absolute authority that El Mencho spent 15 years building? Nobody knows. And in an organization where uncertainty is indistinguishable from weakness, that open question is itself a vulnerability. The second name is Hugo Gonzalo Mendoza Gaetan El Sapo. The Attorney General's office has placed his name in multiple succession assessments, and sources indicate that surviving family members of El Mencho have explicitly backed him to lead cartel operations. Critically, he controls the precursor chemical logistics for fentanyl production. That means he controls the CJNG's single most profitable revenue stream. In any organization, the person who controls the money controls the loyalty, control the supply chain, and you can buy the allegiance that a dead boss can no longer command through fear. Then there are others. Ricardo Ruiz Velasco El Dobla are identified by the United States Treasury as the operational leader of the cartel's Special Forces Unit. Heracles Guerrero Martinez El Logo, who controls fuel theft operations across Michoacán, a revenue source that sounds secondary until you understand it generates hundreds of millions of dollars annually. Each of these men holds real regional power. None of them holds national authority. And that gap, that space between what they currently have and what they need to actually lead, is precisely where internal wars are born. Security analysts spent years warning that the only scenario capable of fracturing the CJNG from within was the simultaneous loss of its symbol and its operational nervous system. That scenario was considered unlikely. That scenario just happened on a Sunday in February 2026. Analyst David Salcedo told CNN directly that the CJNG now faces a succession war commanders fighting to establish who controls the organization at a national level. He compared it explicitly to the internal conflict that consumed the Sinaloa cartel following El Mayo Zambada's capture in 2024. A conflict that turned Sinaloa into what observers described as a sustained state of siege. The critical difference, analysts warn, is scale. The CJNG's territorial reach is significantly wider than Sinaloa's. A fragmentation war inside this organization would not stay contained to one state or one region. It would burn across the country. And there is one more layer of context that adds particular weight to all of this. Jalisco is scheduled to host 4 matches of the 2026 FIFA World Cup less than 4 months from now. International athletes, hundreds of thousands of tourists, media from every country on the planet. The strategic calculus around what happens inside Mexico's most powerful cartel in the coming weeks carries implications that extend far beyond the country's internal politics. There is also a question that will now never be answered. When El Tuli activated those blockades from El Grolo in the hours after El Mencho fell, was he executing a pre-established contingency plan on behalf of his fallen boss? Or was he using the chaos of that moment to establish his own dominance over potential rivals inside the organization? In the cartel world, that distinction matters enormously. A lieutenant acting in the name of his boss and a lieutenant using his boss's death to consolidate his own power are doing 2 entirely different things. The first scenario leaves a vacuum when he dies. The second means the internal war had already quietly begun before any of us were watching. Either way, the result is the same, a void that no one is positioned to fill without violence. The parachute rifleman brigade arrived from the sky. The same sky where El Mencho had once seemed untouchable. The same mountains where an entire network of community informants had protected a ghost for 15 years, with nothing more than a phone call and a man feeding chickens by the road. On this particular Sunday, that system failed. On this Sunday, the army arrived before the warning did. In a single weekend, Mexico took down the most elusive cartel boss in modern history and the man who made it possible for that boss to exist. 2 men, 1 operation, 1 Sunday. LO3 has the bloodline but still needs to demonstrate the authority. El Sapo has the backing but needs to prove he can inspire the fear. El Doble R has the tactical force but lacks the territory. And every regional commander who spent years obeying a man they feared is now looking at the same empty throne and doing the same calculation. In the narco world, that question does not stay unanswered for long, and the answer, when it comes, will not be quiet.